Yeah, I'm Jeff Wilfong Pritchard, and I'm the minister at St. Andrew's United Church just over here. And Kay and I have worked closely with Emmanuel in his doctoral program. I'm also on the board of Diego with Emmanuel, so got all kinds of connections. And when Audrey asked me to speak, she put down, "We are witnesses here." And that's pretty broad. So,
Well,
so I just want to tell you a story or two about how I've come to understand what it means to be a witness on the side of ensuring that the consequences of genocide can be healed. And genocide happens in different ways, of course, and one of the things that we've learned through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Canada with our Indigenous peoples is that term cultural genocide. And one of the very specific ways in which that genocide was undertaken was through the stories that were told about Indigenous people here. And one of the stories that my church, the Protestant Church, and the forerunner of the United Church of Canada, the Methodist Church, told was that the Indigenous people of this part of the world, on Treaty 6, had no written language before the missionaries came. And when the missionaries came, the first thing that they did was to create a written language for the Cree people so that they could read the Bible in their own language and that they could sing hymns in their own language. Now, the Cree people have rejected that story, rightly so, all the way along, because they say, we've always had our own language. And but one of the things that happened was when the missionaries came out here, and they also say, we gave the syllabary, which is it's a system of syllables, basically, that sound out phonetically. They said, we gave the syllabary to the missionaries when they came here, and then they produced it into their own works. But we had it long before they did. But just think of what that means if you were telling a story about a people and you're saying they didn't know how to read and write, so we had to create it for them. I mean, what are you saying about them? Right? You're automatically putting them in a very negative place, and you're also saying that they didn't have the wherewithal to do it, so we had to do it for them. And then what happens when you don't listen to the story that they are telling about, we had them all the way along, and we gave them to this group of people that asked for them. It's a fascinating story about the syllabics, because one of the things the Cree say is that they gave these syllabics to the Methodist missionaries when they came. And when the Methodist missionaries went back to England, they gave them to a guy by the name of William Moon, who had been blind since his early 20s, and he had been searching for a way to allow blind people to read the Bible, and he'd been through all kinds of systems and couldn't find anything. The missionaries go back in 1846 with the syllabary, and in 1847 he's published his system to help blind people read. And it looks exactly like the Cree syllabary. So here's another story. Rather than saying that the missionaries created the syllabary for the Cree people, the real, truer story is it was a gift that was given, the syllabary was, to the missionaries. And through the ingenuity of the missionaries then, they were able to take that syllabary and allow people all over the world to read in their own language. And so that gift that the Cree gave to the world is one that had consequences for literally hundreds of millions of people. Now, just think of what would happen if we told that story, rather than the story of we had to give the Cree their own syllabary because they didn't know how to read. Totally different story. It empowers them to tell the story that they've been telling all the way along. And it allows us to see ourselves as the generous recipients of a great gift, rather than people who had to do for others that which they couldn't do for themselves. And just one other little piece of that. I was doing this research as my doctoral work, and a friend of mine here at Edmonton said, you know, there's going to be a conference in Tunisia on, it's going to be called the Science, Art, Gender, and the Rise of Indigenous Languages. And it was a conference that came out of the Arab Spring in 2011. And one of the things that is of great interest in North Africa is the way that indigenous languages have been suppressed, and how that also is a form of genocide sometimes, but certainly of cultural suppression. And so with the rise of the Arab Spring, there was this huge interest in indigenous languages. My friend said, well, you should go. So I did. What I found there was a huge network of people all over the world, people from Canada, the United States, Europe, North Africa, all who are crucially interested in the recovery of the cultural symbols that allow people to express themselves as their own culture, as their own people, and not as others who have conquered them or colonized them would have them speak. And Tunisia is a wonderful example of the way that that has been applied politically. Tunisia, as you know, is, or may not know, is one of the few countries that has not gone back into dictatorship after the Arab Spring. They've written their own constitution. And it's also now become a great target for ISIS because of its success. So the bombing of the Bardo, or the shooting of the Bardo, and the attack on Sousse are deliberate attacks on a whole culture, because the ISIS is going after the tourist industry there, because if they can keep the tourists away, the country will collapse. And so just when you think of genocide and the effects of it, think also of those webs of people that are all over the place who are passionately concerned about uncovering indigenous language and culture and the rich resource it is, not only for the culture that bears it, but the way that culture then gives it as a gift to the rest of the world. So, that's it. Oh. Not quite it. Gordon asked me if he was going to read something, and I just wanted to share with you this quote from Nelson Mandela that came out of the conference. And here it is here. Nelson Mandela wrote that a good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. But when you add that to that a literate tongue or pen, then you have something very special. So keep all those people who are writing in your thoughts and in your prayers. Thanks, Audrey. Yes.
Your little talk.
Sure.
As a minister.
Yes.
You know, I'm indigenous to this land.
Yes.
And I've been working in all kinds of capacities to save my people. When you talk about genocide, you need to speak from a first-hand experience around the ministers who've contributed, the churches who continue to contribute to the demise of our people by classifying our spiritual practices as demonic and still continuing to do what they can to oppress the people spiritually. You know, you can have a church anywhere in this city. We as a people cannot have a sweat lodge in this city without all kinds of permits. And it's our land, it's our territory. When you're going to tell a story from a church's perspective, talk about what the church has done. The three bodies of churches that work together with the government of Canada in regards to assimilation policy. Speak from that viewpoint.
And
that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
One thing about this place, it's an open forum, let me tell you.